Okay.
Okay, we're recording.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Chanuka Sameach to everybody. I want to start with the title. Who can explain me the title in Hebrew? What's called Chanuka Minatora Minayin. I don't want the answer. I want to explain what's the meaning of the title. I'll translate Chanuka Minatora Minayin as what's the source of Hanukkah from the Bible. Now, can someone give me an example of a similar question in Chazal?
So with regard to Purim,
Yeah, what do they ask? Like Esther Minator Minayin. And say Anochi Esther Esther Panai. Haman Minator Minayin. Right? Hamina says they're taking some the rabbis are taking a rabbinic holiday, something that happened later, and looking for some hint or some allusion to that event in the Torah, looking for the same word somewhere. Understand the approach? That's a classic midrashic approach, which is based on the idea that the Torah is the source for everything, or it's like an upgraded version of Masev Simon Labanim. Not that the stories in Chumash determine what will happen in the future, but they're sort of forecasting what might happen in the future. That's a rabbinic understanding. Now, who can explain my English title? The Prophet Who Stole Hanukkah. Anyone get that joke or not? No one knows. Anyone knows American movies?
What's the question again?
Who can explain what's not the answer, but what's the joke behind, or what's cute about the title, The Prophet Who Stole Hanukkah?
Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Okay, that's right. The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. I mean, what I'm alluding to is there's some connection between what I'm getting at is that the Hebrew title is alluding to there might be something in the Bible, in Tanakh, that's going to sort of forecast Hanukkah, even though Hanukkah happens way after Tanakh is closed. And there's something in the Hanukkah story that relates to Christmas, which is really strange because it's two totally different holidays and it's different religion. Already? So that's what I want to get across today. Now, just for the fun of it, tell me why in logic there's no logical reason why there should be any connection between Hanukkah and what you call Xmas or Christmas, whatever you want to call it, depending on your custom. As a rule of thumb, in Israel, we're less worried about Christianity than we are in America. In America, growing up, you had to say Xmas, you couldn't mention the word, because in America, we're losing. There's a danger of assimilation. In Israel, it's not a big danger anymore. Like, we have our own country, we're back. So, saying words that relate to something in Christianity aren't nothing so terrible. Now,
it's not all around you like it is in America.
Louder, rushing?
It's not all around you like it is in America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't even notice.
They were always trying to convert you also.
Yeah, and here we're, what do you call it? We're just trying to stay alive. Now, back to thing, but tell me from a technical reason, why is Hanukkah in Kislev? Why is it Hanukkah on the 25th of Kislev? What's the technical reason you all learned?
That's when they entered the Beis Hamikdash and relit the menorah.
The classic story is the Hashmonaim were fighting. We're talking about 160 BCE, 167 BCE, 164 BCE. About 200 years before the Second Temple was destroyed. 200 years after it's built, we're under Greek rule. There's the Great Revolt against the Greeks. After the decrees of trying to stop the religion, and then we won the battle. And we won the battle. The day we won the battle, we got to the temple. It was in ruins. A couple of minutes before Shkia, we want to, restart working the temple. We find a little thing of oil. We light the menorah, and it lights for 8 days. Correct? That's the famous story. Now, by the way, if that was the case, the first candle should be on the 26th, not the 25th. Agreed? Because you light the menorah from the evening to the morning. So the first candle would be the 26th, not the 25th, but that's a little technical problem. Now tell me why. So pretty much the date of Hanukkah is because that's when the battle happened. Understand? Pretty much by chance. Now, from what you remember growing up, why is Christmas on the 25th of Kislev? December?
The solstice.
It depends what happened 9 months beforehand. But that was by chance also. No, that's when he was born, according to their tradition. but that's when she gave birth. Maybe she was a couple of weeks early. We don't know. Now, maybe it was like maybe it was a cesarean. Now, what that they didn't have that back then, did they? The
Or Caesar.
um, yeah. The what was I talking about? Okay, now what I want to show you in the shiur today that there might be some connection. To do so, we have to go back and see. I'm going to start with a biblical source for Hanukkah, why Hanukkah is in Tanakh, and then we'll go backwards and see how it might relate to another holiday. Okay, now I want to begin. I'm going to use the English source sheet I put up, just to sort of scare you with the date. Actually, I'm going to start with my Hebrew source sheet. My mistake. Where are we? I have to share my screen first. There we go. That's why I couldn't do it. Share screen. We don't want WhatsApp. No, that's not good. Oh, it's too many sufganiyot. 1 second. We need. Here we are. Okay. Just a quick review of the timeline, something you shall be familiar with. We're talking about the Second Temple period. Just so you have an idea of the time period. There's the famous 70 years of Babylonian rule that Yirmiyahu predicted. Without teaching Yirmiyahu, just everyone's heard of Yirmiyahu 70 years. They begin in the 4th year of Yehoiakim when Nebuchadnezzar becomes king in Babel, his rise to power, on chapter 25. 7 years later is the exile of Yehoiachin, called Galut Yehoiachin. When Yehoiakim dies, that's the first wave of exile. 11 years later is Galut Tzidkiyahu and the temple being destroyed. Basically, the temple was destroyed 18 years after Nebuchadnezzar came into power. It's the 18th year of his reign. It's all in the Psukim, 18 or 19. And then about 50 years later, in the meantime, the majority of Israel is in Babylonian exile. The people have given up hope. Remember Yechezkel's vision of dry bones? Yeah? But Yechezkel tells the people one day we'll come back. But Yechezkel is giving them hope, even though you're in exile, one day you'll come back. And sure enough, 70 years after the Babylonians took power, which is 52 years after the temple was destroyed, Cyrus gives his famous decree, allowing the Jews to return. We'll get to that source soon. They return under Cyrus, but there's a building freeze. It means they're supposed to start working on it. They have permission to build the temple, but the local population gives them a hard time. We'll read that story soon. And then about 20 years later, which is about 7 years since the temple was actually destroyed, in the 2nd year of Daryavesh, and this is the main topic in the book of Haggai and Zechariah in the opening chapters, we're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony on the second temple that's going to work. And from year 2 to year 6 of Daryavesh, they'll be working on the temple. But the day they begin construction on the second temple is either the 24th or 25th of Kislev. We'll see exactly why very soon. But what I want to show you is that in the book of Haggai and in the story of the rebuilding of the second temple, the groundbreaking ceremony and the major prophecies of Zechariah are going to be on the 24th of Kislev, which is the day before work actually begins on the second temple. So we're always saying there's a connection between the second temple, which is the temple during the Hasmonean time period, but this is like 200 years beforehand. There's some connection between this date, or at least this time of year, and the second temple. Okay. Now here I'm not going to do this in detail, but just want to make sure you remember. There's 2 models of redemption. Yirmiyahu says after the 70 years, you have to. God can redeem you, but you have to want to be redeemed. You have to go out for me, and pray for me, and look for me from Galut. When you search for me with all your heart, and then I'll be there for you, and I'll bring back your exile. Yirmiyahu says that I'll bring you back only when you're worthy and ready, when you want to come back. Yechezkel talks about because it's Achilo Hashem, it's a desecration of God's name when Am Yisrael was in exile for so long. Yechezkel says, even though you're not deserving, Lo L'manchem Ani Oseh, even though you're not deserving, okay, but for the sake of my great name, that's defamed because you're in exile, I'll bring you back even though you're not deserving, but once you come back, I'll take you from all the nations and bring you back here, and then I'll sprinkle upon you purification water. I'll give you a new heart, and I'll get rid of your heart of rock, etc. And basically, both talk about redemption. The question is redemption preceded by tshuva or not? And then, of course, that's a big argument to this day about how the process of redemption works. And do we have to make the first move, or does God make the first move? And once we're here, do we do tshuva before we come, after we come? That's pretty much the machloka between kibbutz Surgot and shchorot, pretty much. Now, we're going to pick up basically other, you know what? We'll just start from the beginning. I'm going to skip to, I'm going to get back to this in a minute. I just want to show you, I'm going to go to the other source sheet now in English. Just real quick, these are sources I'm sure you're familiar with. Ezra chapter 1, the first year of Koresh, as Yirmiyahu predicted, 7 years are over. God is behind, that's what the Navi says, is that wasn't Koresh, God was behind that event. God was inspiring Koresh to allow the Jews to build. And when the Persians defeated the Babylonians and the Medes, his first act of King Koresh, of Cyrus the Great, was to allow all the ethnic groups to go back and build their places of worship, give them religious autonomy. That's in the famous Cyrus cylinder, which you can find in the British Museum. Among those nations was Israel, and therefore the Navi says, Zechariah is saying that God inspired me to go, that all the Jews in the Persian Empire can go to Yerushalayim and build the house of God. And if you're not going, to send money. And what happens in the book of Ezra, we arrive, but the enemies of Yehuda and Binyamin, here we're building, they get into a big fight. And then what I call the first intifada, the people of the land, but Amaretz, are weakening the people of Yehuda, scaring them from building. They have lobbyists in the UN or in the Persian Empire, lobbying, telling the Persian authorities, don't let the Jews build a temple, they'll rebel again, you can't trust them, look what they did to the Babylonians. And that gets a building freeze from the time of Koresh all the way until the reign of Daryavesh. You can do a calculation, it's about 18 years in between. Now, that's the background, and therefore, in the second year of Daryavesh, there's an opportunity now that there's a new administration in Persia to build the temple. Chagai is a Navi with the people in the beginning of the second temple period. And as Daryavesh comes into power, in the second year of his reign, Chagai tells the people in Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's time to do some awakening. And he gives a message to the political leaders, Zerubbabel. Remember Kate Bavel's Zerubbabel, the Kate Shivim Noshati? That's part of the song is all based on what we just read. It was after 70 years, Zerubbabel is the political leader of Davidic descent, who comes back, he becomes the governor. He's not king because Persia's ruling, but he becomes the governor. And Yeshua is the high priest at the time. Of course, there's no temple yet, but he's going to be, there's at least an altar. And he's in charge of the Kohanim. Zerubbabel is the political leader. And Chagai tells him the people are saying it's not time to build. Okay? The people are saying, Lo eit beit Hashem livnot, it's not time to build. And he tells them it is time to build. Go start building, go start taking things out. Now, I want someone to tell me why are people, what leads people to reach the conclusion that God doesn't want us back? That it's not, give me a reason why the people who returned with these great hopes and nothing's happened for the last 20 years. Why do they think, why are they interpreting that it's not redemption? Just give me a good logical reason.
They came up against tremendous opposition from the people who'd stayed behind. And their life was very, very difficult, and they weren't managing to build as they'd hoped.
No, they made Aliyah. We'll see, the economy was terrible. Nothing's growing. There's 4 nations there. It's not safe for Yeshua. You follow? This is not the redemption they've been praying for. Yeah, Miriam?
There were no miracles.
That's right. Nothing. It's not like Yitzhak Mitzrayim. It's nothing anyone ever hoped for. I mean, they were hoping for redemption, but not this way. Koresh never said in his own words, God sent me. He's in fact, Koresh talks about Marduk. We discussed this when we did the Purim Shiurim. Because Purim happened, the story of Purim relates to all this. But there's a good reason for people to be down and depressed. Okay? We're all familiar with the feeling. It's when you're expecting redemption and you're being told by your prophets, this is time of redemption, and it looks exactly the opposite. What mistake did we make making Aliyah? I don't want to make it relative to what they call it, or to a modern day time period.
Maybe some people think it would be easy.
Yeah. People, making Aliyah, coming on one-way tickets, leaving everything behind, hoping this is a Reshit Smichat Golotenu, and all of a sudden they find out everything's falling apart. And we should have waited for the real Mashiach kind of idea. Now, what's the job of the rabbis or the Nevi'im? to give people hope when they're down. Now, what I want to try and explain now is that Hagai's job is to give the people what we call in English chizuk, in Hebrew chizuk. Remember chazak? I'll show you. We'll read it in a minute. The job of the Navi is don't give up hope. Things can't get better. And I'll just paraphrase what the Navi is going to say. The people are interpreting their political and economic situation as a sign from God he doesn't want us back. If God wanted us back, we'd have sovereignty. If God wanted us back, we'd have a strong economy. If God wants us back, he would have brought us all back on magic carpet. There'd be miracles. Right? And it's not happening. The fact that none of that's happening is a sign that God doesn't want us back, and we're still in Galus. Either God left us, or maybe it's not time yet. Maybe our calculations are wrong. Maybe we have to wait longer. Maybe it's someone else's fault. Maybe if more Jews were making Aliyah, it would be good, but not enough people made Aliyah. But in the bottom line, it's clear. We'll see from lots of sources that people are down and depressed. The job of Haggai and Zechariah will be to give them hope in times of in this difficult time. And he's telling them exactly the opposite. You're not building the temple because you think God doesn't want you. God says the opposite. Start working on the temple to show God you want him, and he'll be there for you. So the message Haggai is going to give is exactly the opposite. If you want your economy to recover, and if you want your temple to be rebuilt, and you want to return to sovereignty, show God you care by working on the temple, building your society better, and God will help you. God won't do it for you, but he'll do it with you. That's Haggai's message in a nutshell. And now we're going to follow Haggai in chapter 2. I'm going to share my screen. Now I'm going to take the Hebrew because the Hebrew source sheet has more on it. That's not the one we wanted. No, we don't want this one. We want not this one. This one. Okay, we did this one. Okay. I hope the Hebrew's okay, or should we go with English? Hebrew's okay, I hope? Okay. So the second year of Dayavesh, in Rosh Chodesh Elul, the people, we saw this, the people were saying, it's not time to build. And he says, it is. Then he says, look how bad your economy was. You try to make a lot and nothing, what do you call it? Nothing's growing. Yan ma nu Hashem. Why is nothing happening? Yan beiti asheru charei v'atem rasim mishel beito. God's house is destroyed, and you care only about your own interests. You're not caring about the national interests. And al ken alechem kol shamayim mital. That's why it's not raining, and that's why nothing's growing, and the land's not giving its produce. And therefore, I called a famine on the land, and nothing's growing. And therefore, Haggai tells them, now I'm with you. Ani itchem nu Hashem. And God inspires them. Okay. Then in Perek Bet, it's the last day of Sukkot. Still no temple, but still gathering for Sukkot. This is the last day of on Hoshana Rabbah. Haggai tells the people, anyone remembers how great the first temple was? Any old timers? Now this is a joke, but what? Pasuk Dal Batak Chazak Zerubbabel. See that? V'Chazak Yoshua ben Yetzadok. V'Chazak Kol Haaretz. It's a triple Chazak, Chazak, Chazak. Okay. Why? Because I'm with you. Be strong. I'm here to help you. Not, I won't do it for you. I'll do it with you. But you have to make a move. And now the famous line that Trump sort of quotes all the time: "V'chol mar Hashem tzvot." In a short time, ani marish et hashamayim v'ta'aretz. There'll be a big upheaval. There'll be like a political earthquake. Everything will change. And Rashi says it's talking about the miracles that are going to happen in the time of the Chashmonaim. Of course, that wasn't Haggai's original claim. Wasn't it's going to happen 200 years from now? It's going to happen soon. It doesn't happen until 200 years later with the Chashmonaim. And then what does he promise them? This is a great line. The second temple that they're building now can be greater than the first temple. This next one can be greater than the first one. Or what we like to say, Jerusalem can be great again. And now we're set for Haggai's magnum opus, I think what it's called. This is his big thing. They're going to break ground on Erev Chanuka, on the 24th of Kislev, and he's going to give a double message. We'll read it now inside. He's going to tell the people that if you let me do this in a regular Tanakh because I want you to see it inside with English Hebrew. Where are we? Share. Not that one, not that one. Here we are. This one. Zoom. We don't want all these. We want these are all the buildings that ended. Shannon, I'll just open up Haggai with the Tanakh. Bible, Haggai, chapter 2. Okay. Watch what happens in chapter 2. We did Gadol Yekvod Habayit Hazeh. Israel will be great again. Now, look at the date. On the 24th day of the 9th month, which is Erev Chanukah, year 2 of Daryavesh. Chagai's been talking for the last several months, ever since Rosh Chodesh Elul that year. Okay, Chagai has this nevuah, and first he begins with a quiz for the Kohanim, asking them about the difference between how Tuma transmits itself as opposed to Tara. Basically, if you remember Kudis, remember, if you touch somebody Tameh, you become Tameh. So he asks the Kohanim, if there's something that's Tameh and it touches something else, Tuma spreads. But something that's Kadosh, something that has holiness, it touches something else, the Kedusha doesn't spread. Basically, he's saying, if you're passivity, negativism spreads with passivity, holiness has to be infused with action. Okay? And therefore he's saying the people are like something tamei that just spreads doing nothing. Okay. Then he says as follows. Then he says, now pay attention, and again, pay attention to the Navi saying pay attention. But from this day on, from the 24th of Kislev, from the day miterms from Even al Even Beichal Hashem, the day before they start putting brick on top of brick in God's house. What I can infer from here is that this is a groundbreaking ceremony happening on the day before construction begins. So I could say it's either Erev Chanukah or I can say the 25th of Kislev when they started working on it, or the 24th they started working on it. I remember I told you we really celebrate Chanukah on the 24th because we light candles on the 24th going into the 25th. But the date is too close to Hanukkah to be by chance. They says, pay attention to your economy, because remember, this is the end of last year's fiscal year. It's last year's produce is over now, and they had a terrible year. Last year, you were expecting a produce of 20, you ended up with 10, you were expecting 50, and you got 20. Basically, you've had all these terrible things happening to your economy, and God hasn't been with you. And now, pasuk yitchet, simun alavavchem, pay attention. From this day on, v'yom ha'seva, but again, from the 24th day of Kislev, from the day miyon asher yusarech al Hashem simun alav, from the day that we begin construction, we laid the foundations of God's house, pay attention. Now there's nothing left in the field because last year's produce is over. It's the winter now, right? Nothing's growing. The grapes haven't grown this year, the teina and the rimon, and even the olive oil. There's nothing. From this year, I'll bring blessing. I mean, up until now, it's been bad. From now on, things will be good. But you won't notice it for another couple of months until next year's produce starts, until next spring. So he's promising a return to strong economy. And then he gives another nevuah on the same day, on the 24th of Kislev, tells Zerubbabel, the governor of Yehuda, there's going to be a big political earthquake. There'll be a big earthquake of the heaven and the earth, like starting from scratch again. I'm going to turn over great governments. Kingdoms are going to fall. Stronger armies are going to fall. Tanks are going to be, or chariots are going to be overthrown on its riders. Horses, basically, there'll be people fighting within. There'll be outside enemies. And there'll be a big political upheaval. Old superpowers are going to fall apart. Things will crumble. And at the end of the day, what will happen? God's going to take you, Zerubbabel, my servant, right? And you'll be like a chotam. A chotam is a person signing the documents. Remember the chotam of the king? Okay? Because I'm choosing you. What Zechariah is alluding to is a return to sovereignty. Got it? There's what Chagai is saying. Work on the temple, your economy will recover, and your sovereignty will return. And God will take care of the international events. Things will happen. There'll be a change of governments. Persia will fall. And maybe in the whole new constellation of events, you have an opportunity to return to your sovereignty. That's what Chagai is hoping for. Does it happen? Again, it all depends. We'll see in a minute on how well they behave. So that's Chagai's message. I call Chagai with the Kippah Sruga. Understand why? That's his message of return. Chagai has a contemporary, a fellow Navi, his name is Zechariah, who's talking the exact same time period. They're like a tag team. But Zechariah, I like to say, has a Kippah Sruga. A Kippah Shchora, meaning he's going to focus more on religious growth. Listen what he says. We'll just open up Zechariah, the opening lines. And then we can skip a lot. If I back open to Chagai, if I go back to Zechariah, This is opening line. See the month? It's the 8th month in the second year of Daryavesh, which is right in between Chaggai's opening Nevuah before the groundbreaking ceremony. It's a month before the groundbreaking ceremony, a month after Chaggai first inspired them. Now, he says, God was angry with you. Okay, go tell the people, God tells Zechariah, Kol Hashem Tzvot, Shuva Elaynu Hashem, Vashuva Lechem. Remember that song, remember Shuva Lev and Shuva Lechem? Okay, so God says, if you return to me, I'll return to you. You want the Shekhinah to return? You have to make the first effort. Return to me, says the Lord, and I'll return to you. And don't be like your ancestors, who the Nevi'im called upon them to do tshuva, to fix their ways. And they didn't listen. And that's why the first temple was destroyed. But instead, follow my laws. Okay, keep my laws and chukim, as like I commanded you by way of my Nevi'im. Okay, and therefore that's why your ancestors were punished because they didn't follow the laws. It's time for you to follow the laws. In the meantime, that's his opening. Now, Zechariah is telling the people, together with Chaggai, it's also about your behavior and your dedication to mitzvot. In the meantime, they break ground on the second temple on the 24th of Kislev in the 9th month. 2 months later, in the 11th month, also at the end of the month, on the 24th of the month, okay, in Chodesh Shvat, Daryavesh gives another vision. He sees at night, he has a vision of horses and a little complicated. But in the vision, he asks a question. The Malach comes and turns to God in that vision and asks God, it's been 70 years since the temple was destroyed. We just broke ground. Have Rahmanas on us. Have mercy on us. Is this really going to get off the ground? Because the winter's almost over. Maybe it's time to start actually getting the building moving. Remember, it will take 4 years till it's built. So the Navi is praying to God. Will it work this time? Right? And the Malach says good things to him. And then, because don't worry, God says, I'm zealous now for Jerusalem. I want to help. I'm angry with the enemies. That what? I gave them the right to punish you a little bit and they overdid it. And therefore, Pasuk Tet Zayin is famous. L'chein kol mar Hashem, shatid Yerushalayim barachamim. Zechariah tells the people, in the name of God, God is returning to Yerushalayim with the midah of rachamim, with mercy. Beiti baneba, God's house will be rebuilt, God says. And we'll start construction projects. The Kabbah is the plumb line. You'll see building. And it will be people will be coming out again. My city will spread out, and God's going to have mercy and again on Jerusalem, and comfort Himself with Yerushalayim. Let's go to Nachamu Ami, and choose Yerushalayim again. Basically, Zechariah is agreeing with Chaggai, but again on the condition to keep his mitzvot. And then in chapter 2, which we read on Shabbat, he has another vision, and he tells the people the 7 visions he has, but the famous one starts in Pasuk Yadalid. Roni v'simchi bat Zion, which implies that people are down and depressed, and therefore he tells them, be happy, rejoice, sing and rejoice, because my Shekhinah is going to return. And if you do a good job, other nations are going to come and join you. You'll be my nation. I'll be your God. I'll dwell among you. And then you know that God's behind all these events. Yudah will return to its nachala, to its portion in Israel, Admat HaKodesh, who choose Yerushalayim again. This is the famous, what they call Haftarah 4, we read on Shabbat. Again, it's not by chance. It's not just, it's a Haftarah about a vision of a menorah, but it's about the time period of Chanuka at its inset in the beginning of Beit Sheni. In chapter 3, he continues with the Nevuah to the Kohen Gadol to get his act together. He basically tells him, the Satan's angry with you, basically, or God's angry with you. His clothing is dirty. He has filthy garments. It's change your garments, basically get your act together, do a good laundry, clean your soul, etc., and get the Kunah going again, and work together with Zerubbabel. And the famous vision is in chapter 4, where he wakes up and he sees a vision of a menorah. He asks Zechariah, God asks Zechariah, what do you see? He says, I see a menorah, all made out of gold, with 7 branches. Remember the 7? He sees a picture of the menorah. 2 olives or olive trees or olive branches on top of it, one to the right of the top of the menorah, one to the left. Basically, the olive branch is giving oil and feeding the menorah, giving it light. Okay, so I tell the Malach, I don't know what this is, and Malach says, don't you see what this is? And then he gives his famous answer, Vayan v'yomer elai lemor, zed v'Hashem Zerubbabel lemor, lo b'chayav v'lo b'koach, kim b'ruchi amar Hashem tzvot. What's he saying? the way I understand this is because he's working with Chagai. Koach Chayo means economic prosperity. Remember? Kochi b'atzem yadi aseh et hachayil hazer. Orishet Chayo, a multitasker. Means it's not only about return to prosperity that Chagai was talking about. And it's not only about return to military strength that God's talking about, but it has to come with Ruach. There's got to be a spirit behind it. There's got to be a movement behind it to become God's people again. And it's doable. It looks like a big mountain in front of Zerubbabel, but that big mountain can turn into a plain. Basically, a big challenge can be something that you can achieve if if you have the right attitude. And then he talks about exactly about their depression. God tells Zerubbabel, God tells the people, Tzchari tells the people, Yedei Zerubbabel Yisdu et habayit hazeh. Zerubbabel, he laid the foundation of this house, and it will get done. V'yadav tavatzana. And when it's built, it'll take 3-4 years, then you'll know that God sent me. This is all from God. Kibi baz l'yom ktanot. That's the key line here. The cynics, we know them very well. Whatever, without making fun of Israel news stations. The cynics, oh, that's not good. That's not good. Everyone's, this is nothing. Yom ktanot means like small things. People are being baz. How do you turn to say baz? Booze, right? They're making fun of, oh, you think this is redemption? This is a joke. Okay, so those people who are so skeptic about what's going on, they'll see and they'll rejoice finally when this thing really happens, when they see God returning to land and everything working well. Then he says, who are the two Zaytim on top of the menorah? That's going to be Zerubbabel and Yoshua, who have to work together. And these are the same Bnei Yitzhar, and later given Nuvot, they have to work together. Zechariah goes on and on. There's again 7 visions altogether. And in the final one, he tells him, when it's over, people from far away, and they'll work in building the temple, and then you'll know that God was with me. And then there's a caveat on the whole thing, on the condition you listen to me. Okay? So God's promising that it will happen, but it can't happen. And then 2 years later, if you remember, they ask about fasting on Tisha B'Av in the 4th year of Zechariah, and he tells the people, where's the pasuk that Zion? If you want the fast days to be holidays, what you need to do is dabru emet ishet re'eu, emet mishpat shalom shiftu b'sharechem, v'ishat ra'at tashuv bavchem. Basically, do justice, righteousness, be kind, think good things about one another. No more sinat chinam. Don't lie and don't love lying, fake news and stuff like that. That's what God hates. And if you do that, then the fast days, remember, it can become holidays, and then other nations will come, and Jerusalem will be great again. Okay, Rabim will come to look for God in Yerushalayim, and things will be. Remember, we talked about the Ish Yehudi is going to be leading people to God in Yerushalayim. That all relates to the Migath Esther share. Okay, the setting is clear now. So that's Chanuka Minat Torah Minayin. So we explained that in the Second Temple period, Chanuka is the day of groundbreaking of the Second Temple, but also great hopes for the Second Temple of recovery in times of depression. Now, I want to suggest a reason why Chagai picks that date to dedicate. I like to give an example of when you make a groundbreaking ceremony for a new shul or a new building project. When you have enough money to build the shul, or when you have enough money to make a groundbreaking ceremony. And then you tell the people, we're almost there. We need another $1 million, but what do you call it? And we have someone matching funds, right? For every shekel you give, someone will donate 2 shekel, and you get a tax deduction. But you get the people together at a groundbreaking ceremony, and you give a speech to make it happen. You don't break ground when everything's ready. You break ground when you have enough money to have a kiddush, and give a speech to the people who come for the free food to feel guilty and make a donation. And therefore, what's important is the speech at the groundbreaking ceremony. But you make the groundbreaking ceremony on an important day. Maybe someone's anniversary, maybe some Gvir's birthday, whatever it is. But you pick a date. If you're going to break ground and you don't have enough money, you're going to pick a day that has meaning. So maybe a Rosh Chodesh, something like that. Now, what I want to claim is that Chagai is breaking ground on the winter solstice. You with me? The time of year that he's picking to break ground is it the darkest nights of the year? And that's, we'll bring the source back from Adam Arishon, or a Midrash about Adam Arishon and the Gemara and Avodah Zarah. But why does the winter solstice represent this idea of hope in times of darkness? Because that's exactly what it's about. It's the darkest nights of the year, remember? And then all of a sudden, the days start getting longer. The worst is over. Now, someone tell me, why can't there be a winter solstice on a lunar calendar? But give me logically, why can't there be a winter solstice on a lunar calendar?
All the months are the same.
Our dates keep moving, we're always either early or late.
Yeah, it can never be exact. December 21st is always the shortest day of the year, or the longest night. But if you know your astronomy, and when you've been making Shabbos the last 5-6 weeks, isn't it pretty much the exact same time? All December, Shabbos started 420, whatever it is, it's around the same time. It changes maybe a minute or two a week, but barely changes. Back in November, and back in October, it was changing 10 minutes a week, wasn't it? But it reaches a plateau in the beginning of December and stays the same for about 5-6 weeks, and then it starts all of a sudden it's going to start getting, starting next week, it's going to get longer. Shabbos will start getting later and later. No. The darkest nights of the year can have a lot of light if there's a full moon. Agreed? Remember, the moon also gives you light at night. If I'm looking for the darkest nights of the year when there's no moon, that's the last week of the month, because in the first week of a month, the moon is out at sunset. Remember, and every day gets bigger and bigger. So the first 2 weeks of the month, it's getting lighter and lighter. The last 2 weeks of the month, it's getting less and less light. The moon is waning, and it's rising later and later. Class in astronomy, but the last 5 days of the month, the moon doesn't rise until 4 o'clock, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, getting smaller and smaller. So if I'm looking for the darkest nights of any month, it's the last week of the month in Rosh Chodesh. Understand? And therefore, if I'm looking for the 8 darkest nights of the year, it's going to be the last week of what month? In a Jewish calendar, Nisan is always the first month of the spring. And if not, we add a month. Therefore, Nisan always has the spring equinox. Therefore, the winter solstice has to be 9 months later, either the 9th month or the 10th month. There's the winter solstice always either be in Kislev or Tevet. And therefore, would I put the winter solstice? The last week of the 9th month going into the 10th. And it's perfect. And therefore, our winter solstice is better than December 21st because it's mamish the darkest nights of the year. There's no moon, and it's the longest night. Got it? And it just so happens that's the so therefore it can't be by chance that Chanuka coincides with the 8 darkest nights of the year. With me? And it can't be by chance. So what's our custom? To light a menorah. You follow? Now, I'm going to show you the source of this in the Talmud in Masechet Avodah Zarah. There's a tractate called Avodah Zarah, which is strange, right? Why have a tractate about idol worship? It's forbidden. But there's a law in Avodah Zarah that a Jewish businessman can't sign a business deal with an idol worshiper close to their holidays, because then they'll think it'll support idol worship. Oh, I cut a deal. That's my God's with me on this day. Therefore, Jewish businessmen need to know what the Goyish holidays are to know when not to sign contracts. Got it? So that's the first Mishnah of Avodah Zarah. In the second Mishnah, it's a famous one. Here we are, English, Hebrew, here we are. We want to do not this one, not this one, not this one, maybe this one. No, not this one. Give me a second. Here we are, okay? Here. Masechet Avodah Zarah goes like this. Okay? These are the holidays of the idol worshippers. Rav Chanan says Kalanda is 8 days before the Kufa of winter solstice. Saturn is 8 days after. Then they make up this awesome story. But remember, Adam Arishon was born in Tishrei, right? And his father-in-law got him a really nice watch when they got engaged, or basically a sense of time. I'm joking. Okay, he says like this: Lefi shara Adam Arishon yom shemitmait v'olech. Adam Arishon born in Tishrei, no dummy. starts realizing, hey, the days are getting shorter and shorter. What does he say? I'll share the English over here. What does he say? Amar oili, he knew Yiddish. Okay. Woes to me. Maybe I sinned, and that's why the days are getting darker. And returning to Tovavo, because God said you're going to die, but he doesn't know what that means. Maybe death is no light. Remember when I remember when I sinned? That's my punishment. He's down and depressed. Days are getting darker and darker. Amar v'yashav chet yamin b'tanit tefillah. He davens for 8 days, and after 8 days, he looks at his watch, and what's he say? Rayom sees the days are getting longer. He says, this is nature. Got it? Minag sholam. And he made an 8-day Yom Tov. Herring, kogol, the whole thing. Okay? The next year, he commemorated the 8 days that he fasted and the 8 days that he celebrated and made 2 celebrations. One Kalanda, one Saturna. Got it? He made them the Shem Shemaim, but his kids went off the derech and they turned into idol worship holidays, sun god, dark god, whatever you name it. But don't be surprised that ancient man makes a holiday on what's called Saturnalia. Now, if you know your Goyish things, here, I'll share with you. Is this over here? Wait, I want that one, not this one, not this one. Where's my other one? Not this one, this one, this one. Not this one. Where's Book of Maccabees? I'll get it for you in a minute. Not this one. Oh, here we are. Okay. And just a quick thing, a question.
I just want to know if we have this on our source pages.
Yeah, it should be on one of them. Now I'll send it to you again also. They give you this one? I should have. Yeah, I think it should be on the English one. It's on the English one for sure. Yeah, I think I have. This is the English one. Yeah, it's on the one the prophet stole Christmas. It's got to be, yeah, because this is the main one. So the Roman pagans introduced a holiday called Saturnalia, a week long of lawlessness between December 17th and 25th. That's the 8 days of it's an 8-day holiday, basically, of partying, basically getting drunk on the darkest time of the year. During this time, Roman parts were closed. Roman law said no one can be punished for damaging property. It's like Purim for 8 days, okay? And Lucian, I'm sorry, a Greek writer, talked about, had a whole dialogue called Saturnalia, describes the thing. In addition, there's customs of everyone got drunk, a lot of rice. You can read it later. But basically, wild parties for 8 days. It's like college campus for on steroids. Now, in the 4th century, what happened? Remember in 330, Constantine took over the Roman Empire and made it Christian. Starts the Byzantine time. But Constantine turned the pagan empire into Christianity. But that was for political reasons. The people, you can't stop Saturnalia. It's like, you just can't stop you're not going to stop Purim. You're not going to stop Halloween. It's a people's holiday. Got it? And therefore, the Christian leaders had to solve the problem. It's idol worship, but they have to give it religious meaning. So they made up a medrash that Yashka was born on Christmas, on Saturnalia. And Saturnalia all of a sudden became a holiday for Christianity. I don't have the source there, but if you look it up in detail about Saturnalia, you'll see that in Boston, I think in the 1680s, there was a law in Massachusetts for like 3-4 years forbidding celebration of Christmas because it was a pagan holiday. And then that got overturned also because how can you stop such a minhag? But now you see what I'm getting at? The source for, let me hope that was clear now. Let me undo my share. What I'm getting at is that Yoshka wasn't born on Christmas. Okay? Christmas originally was a winter solstice holiday of idol worshippers. Christians gave it religious meaning for their religious reasons. Okay? Lahabdu Elef Abdalot, way earlier, hundreds of years earlier, Chagai and the leaders in Zechariah pick the darkest time of the year to break ground on a temple as a sign of hope in times of darkness, and not to give up hope, and things can get better. And therefore, don't be surprised that the original meaning of Hanukkah is doing what? Is lighting a candle, remember? Ner Ish Ubeito. Now, remember, it's Ner Ish Ubeito, it's not a din. It's not a din, if you know your halachas, it's not a din in the gavra, it's a din in the bayit, isn't it? Chanukah candles is a din in the home, not a din in the person. You understand why? Especially once the temple is destroyed, the temple turns into your home. You follow? In fact, the purpose of going to the temple is to bring the temple into your home. Remember the first mitzvah in Chumash, Selabeit Avot Selabait? I think we talked about that when we did Shmot years back. Judaism begins with the home. And lighting candles at a home on the darkest nights of the year is so meaningful without any connection to Hanukkah beforehand. Even more so when it becomes an important date, marking the hope of return to nationhood and prosperity. And therefore it became a big day all through Beit Sheni. Now what's going to happen? Chagai's nevuot are not fulfilled, are they? Meaning what? There is no political upheaval. The Persians are running the show for another 200 years. And then the Greeks take over, and boy, things get really bad. And some 200 years after Chagai, all of a sudden there's the decrees of Antiochus you're all familiar with. Okay? And there's the revolt of the Hasmoneans, the famous story. Read the book of Maccabees, you'll read all about it. And sure enough, we take over the temple. And now they see themselves as fulfilling the Nevuot of Chagai. And therefore, what day did they pick to rededicate the second temple? The same day that it was rededicated years earlier. 24th, 25th, you can argue exactly on the date, but the same time of year. Now, when you read the religious sources, when you read Sefer Maccabim, which is written by a frum guy for sure, he doesn't mention a word about the miracle of the menorah. He talks about the military victory. Here, I have it here in English. I'll just share my screen real fast. I can show you the Hebrew also, but in the book of Maccabees, we're not going to have time to do the whole thing. But again, when you read it, you see the author is from as could be. It says, Judah picked men to fight, to take over the fortress. Okay? He chose me. Maybe I'll read the Hebrew better. You have the English on your source sheet. I think I have the Hebrew on my... Yeah, here's better. Antiochus. I'll share with this. It's on. You can open up. It's online. The Book of Maccabees. Lots of websites have it. Now, I'm going to read from Sefer Maccabim, Chanukat HaMizbeach. Okay. What happens? Vaychachu et klei hamikdash. What did they do? Okay. Vayasimu et hamnorah. They made all new kelim for the Beit HaMikdash. They made a new menorah in Neichal. They made a new mizbach ktoret. They made a shulchan hapanim. Okay, to put ktoret on the shulchan. Okay, they put nerot on the menorah. They put lechem on the shulchan. Got it? They put the prochet up on the aron, etc. And they finished all the avodot. Okay, and then on the 25th of Kislev, right, in year 148, they got up in the morning and they did Chanukat HaMizbeach. On the same day, you see, 3 years later, that was the day that the Hellenists, the Jewish Hellenists, purposely defiled it on that day because it was so important. On the same day, they rededicated it. Okay, and therefore Chanukah was called Chanukah because of Chanukat HaMizbeach. And remember, if the 25th is in the morning is when you bring the first korban on the mizbeach, then the 24th at night is when you light your first candle. So basically, the 24th at night is going to be lighting candles is perfect with the 25th being that makes the 24th just as important as the 25th. Okay, and then they celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days, just like the Mishkan was for 8 days. Right? And Yehuda and his brothers said what he called to make it a Chanuka Mizbeach for all generations, right? 8 days, and that becomes what's called Megillat Tanit. Without going to Megillat Tanit in a nutshell, but Megillat Tanit is a work of Tanaim in the time of the Second Temple. There's dates on the calendar of national holidays that you don't say Tachnun, or basically you don't have fast, you can't fast and you can't do Espedim. Every month has a day or two like that. And all those dates were nullified after the temple was destroyed because they had no more meaning. But basically Megillat Tanit, which includes Purim and Hanukkah, is the Second Temple work of dates. It's a calendar of national holidays that basically don't say Tachnun in a modern day setting, or no you're not allowed to fast. And all of them were nullified except for Chanuka and Purim, which means Chanuka and Purim take on eternal meaning past the Churban. Now, what I want to suggest is a reason for why the rabbis make such a big deal about Nes Pach HaShemen. First of all, how many people knew about Nes Pach HaShemen? How many Kohanim would know about it?
Whoever was working.
Yeah,
Whoever
wait.
was
The way the Maccabees sing the song is that they lit the menorah there was enough oil to last one day, and the menorah stayed lit for 8 days. Remember that version? That's not the Gemara. I'll show you what the Gemara says. The Gemara says something very different. They found one container of oil in the Mikdash. Where are we? Where is it? Wrong one. Not this one. Not this one. Yeah, here. Yeah. First of all, the original custom of Hanukkah. Remember? Ner ishu beito, and then every person with a ner, and then counting up or counting down. Remember? Okay. Then the Gemara my Chanukah. They quote Megillah Tanit on 25th Kislev for the 8 days of Hanukkah. You can't do Hespedim and then they tell the story in Hebrew. When the Chashvan took over, they only found one little pach of shemen. Now, pach, remember, is zachar, okay, and it had a OU on it. It had a it was clean with the chotem of the Kohen Gadol. B'lai haya bo meaning the pach. Ela lalik yom achad, enough oil for one day. Nasev bo nes, the miracle was not in the menorah. The miracle was in the pach. Understand? Vidliko mimeno shmon yamin. The miracle was in the pach hashemen, not in the menorah. Because you light the menorah from evening to morning. In the morning, you extinguish it, and you light it again at night. So the miracle was in the container of oil that they used to fill up the menorah. Now, that oil container is made out of pottery, which you can't, it's not transparent. The amount, it says in it like 1 liter or something like that. But how much is in there, you can't see.
It reminds me of, I think if I have the prophet right, Elisha. Is he the one who goes to the person's house and asks her to bring all these containers to fill up with oil?
Exactly, because there's a lady who lost her husband. She's an almana. She has 2 boys who were sold into slavery because she couldn't pay off her debts. She complains to the chief rabbi, to Elisha, hey, help me out here. You got me in this big mess, you and your crazy rabbis. And Elisha told her, what do you have at home? She says, always have this little thing of oil. She says, borrow all the kelim you can from your neighbors. Take that little thing of oil and fill up all the kelim that you borrowed with oil. Sell the oil and pay off your debts. That was Haftorah a couple weeks back, Parsha Va'era. Yeah, but that's the background to the Akedah story about the Vashem Pakadet Sarah in Parsha Va'era in Breshit. That's when we read it. But that's a holiday if someone is down and depressed. It's a holiday of hope. It's very symbolic, the idea of oil. Now, if this is true, how many people would know about the miracle of the menorah?
the Kohen who filled the menorah.
Yeah, and it might have been something different every day. And the little Kohen kid who snuck in at night and kept on filling it up. Remember, God came to him in a dream and says, I want you to sneak into the Mikdash at night when no one's watching and keep filling it up. That's how God did the miracle. But and he had his own source of tahor oil. And by the way, if there's no tahor oil, you can use tamei oil. That's a famous question. What I'm getting at, the rabbis are making a big deal about this, but if I take a modern day analogy, on the front page of the newspaper, right, would be the military victory. That'd be fine, huh? On the Sunday Times religion section, there'll be a little feature article, rumors about a miracle in the temple. The reason for the holiday is not the miracle of the menorah. That's got to be clear. It's not a miracle in the menorah. It's a miracle of the Pach Shemen. So, but most people say is the miracle was a sign, not the reason, but a sign, not a sibah, but a siman. I know the military victory was great. I'm celebrating the military victory, but how do we know God was behind it? So the miracle in the menorah was a sign that God was behind the miracle. That's a classic explanation. But I think there's something a lot deeper. If you know your history of the Hasmonean time period, so Yud and his brothers are okay. They do good. They're still from. His little brother Shimon is one who becomes Kohen Gadol. First Yonatan, then Shimon. Shimon has a son, John Hyrcanus, Yochanan Hyrcanus, who's also pretty good. The grandson, or John Hyrcanus' son, Yanai, well, it's already, he's at Stuki. There's, everything's about money. There's corruption. They're far from anymore. His kids, Hyrcanus and Aristobolus, or Yehuda and Yochanan, basically, they get into a big fight over who's going to take over. And there's a big civil war among the Jews, Tanza Sinat Chinam. And it's so bad that the Rome Pompey comes in and takes over. The Romans come in and take over. There's one brother goes to the Romans for help, and the Romans more than give help, they take over. And that's when Hasmonean sovereignty ends. Understand? That was in 67 BC, like about 100 years after the miracle of Hanukkah, all the sovereignty is gone. So the Hasmoneans saw themselves as fulfilling Chaggai's Nevuah, because they returned to sovereignty and prosperity, but it all fell apart at the end of Beit Sheni. But they kept on celebrating Hanukkah as a national holiday, but now you have to give it meaning. Now, what went wrong? Basically, they focused on Chaggai and not on Zechariah. If you understand my point? We're celebrating a return to sovereignty and prosperity. What we're not focusing on is on the message of Zechariah, of Lo B'chai Lo B'chol Kim Bruchi, or Tivu Darchem U'Malatchem, to fix your ways. Now, what is the symbol? What is the most powerful symbol in Zechariah's Nevuot? The vision of his menorah. Remember, in Beit Sheni, there's no Aron. There's only a menorah. There's no Aron. Like, the symbol of Beit Sheni is the menorah. And therefore, after the Churban, the question comes up, do you continue to celebrate Hanukkah? And there's every reason to stop celebrating like everything else in Megillat Tanit. But we continue to celebrate Hanukkah. It's no longer a holiday celebrating Reshit Tzmichat Gulotenu, that we've achieved it, because we lost it. So it's no longer a national holiday. It turns into, once again, a holiday of hope, the way it started. So what are we doing? We're tying together the darkest time of the year, right? And the concept of hope in times of darkness by lighting candles, which is super meaningful even without the story, and even more meaningful in light of the Nevuah of Zechariah, right? In light of Chaggai and Zechariah working together to start getting Beit Sheni off the ground. And what are we reminding Am Yisrael? Never give up hope on returning to Israel, returning to prosperity and back to your country and rebuilding the temple. But if you're going to return to that, don't make the same mistakes of the Chashmonaim. And what's the message of Lo B'chai Lo B'koach? That's the menorah. So if we're going to continue to celebrate our national victory of returning to rebuilding the temple and returning to sovereignty that the Hasmoneans achieved, I have to remember to tie that together with the miracle of the vision of the menorah and the message of Zechariah. We're not celebrating that a miracle happened. We're celebrating the message of the miracle. Got it? The reason for a holiday is not Pesach HaShemen. The purpose of the holiday is Pesach HaShemen. Got my point? Is Zechariah's Nevuah. I'm lighting candles to remember what to do with God's blessings, and to make sure that knowing never to give up hope, and one day we'll return to our land and become strong again. But what to do with that when it happens? And therefore, in my opinion, Pesach HaShemen is probably the most important mitzvah you could have nowadays, whether the rabbis made up the story or not. You understand? Because anyone Chatzifrim who reached Sefer Maccabim, what conclusion they reached? None of the from sources of Beit Sheni mention Pesach HaShemen. It's not in the Yerushalmi. It's not in Sefer Maccabim. It's only find it in the Bavli, hundreds of years later. But that's what's so important about it, because the Bavli is emphasizing the religious meaning of it. And even if it wasn't for the miracle, there still would have been a national celebration. But lighting candles gives meaning to the national celebration. And therefore, the fact that once I'm keeping Hanukkah as a holiday, the Dorot, I'm going to focus on its meaning, especially the Nevuah of Zechariah. And that's why it's not by chance that the Haftarah for Hanukkah was from Zechariah. Not just because it's a menorah, because of the time period and the message behind the menorah. And if there's a topic that Israel could really use today, it's exactly Zechariah's, Chaggai and Zechariah working together and learning from our mistakes, and being thankful to God for return to sovereignty and prosperity, but what we do with it, and has to be lo b'chav lo b'koach ki b'ruchi. So that was Sefer Maccabim. I'll take questions real fast, and then I have one little last thing afterwards. But was it clear so far what we did?
Yes,
So,
thank
but you followed the titles now, right? Chanuka Minator and B9, it's Chagai and Zechariah. It starts from Adam Arishon. And basically, don't be surprised that in Judaism, without any connection to the miracle of the Hasmoneans, don't be surprised that Jews light candles in their homes in the darkest time of the year. And don't be surprised other cultures get drunk, go New Year's parties, and Saturnalia. There's two ways to deal with depression: alcohol or candles. In Judaism, it's about light, and never give up hope at times of darkness. And remember that when it's not dark outside, to make sure it doesn't get dark again. That's always going to be the most important thing. And if we're going to celebrate military victory always has to be the goal is not the military victory. The goal is what you do with that military victory. Of lo b'chav lo b'koach ki b'ruchi. And that was that's Hanukkah in a nutshell. Let me just go back to the source sheet, make sure I covered everything. What do we have here? Okay, on this one, we did the Adam Arishon, we did the book of Maccabees. Oh yeah, it's called, remember Josephus? So Josephus is living at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, about 100 years after Hanukkah, 150 years after Hanukkah, writing history. His main source is the book of Maccabees. He's the time of the Tanaim, like he's same time as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, pretty much. He's a general in the army in the time of the Second Temple being destroyed. Then becomes a Roman historian. So he tells the stories how you celebrated it, and what do you call it? They regained their freedom and made it a law to keep the festival for 8 days. In other words, he quotes basically Sefer Maccabim, doesn't mention anything about the miracle. Then he says as follows: and from that time to this, we celebrate the festival and call it lights. What do we see? Already at the end of Bayit Sheni, they're lighting candles. And they call it, but he doesn't know why. But he's Jewish, he's got to give a svara. Okay? I suppose the reason was because the liberty beyond our hopes appeared to us, and therefore that was the name for the festival. It means, what Josephus is saying, what do we do now on Hanukkah? Now that we lost our sovereignty, because remember, the Second Temple was destroyed already, he's writing his history. The holiday, we still celebrate the holiday and call it lights, which means the holiday became what we call Chag Urim. What do we do on Hanukkah? We light candles because it's the darkest time of the year, but it reminds us of the hope that came together with the story of the Maccabees, never to give up hope in times of trouble. Then we had how it became Christmas, so that was Josephus adds a lot to that. And then we had the Adam Arishon stuff, and then those are all the sources we had in the beginning of the Second Temple, so that was fine. But that's basically Chagai and Zechariah for the again 2 years later, the 4th year of Dayavesh, they're in the middle of building. That's when they ask the question: do we continue fasting on Tisha B'Av? Is this redemption or not? And then Zechariah gives the famous answer about, I didn't ask you to fast, but I asked you to improve your ways.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure, Rashi, go ahead.
I learned the connection to Sukkot, that they celebrated for 8 days because they miss Sukkot that year. Is that written anyplace?
That's in 2 Maccabees. So there's 4 book of Maccabees. The first one is from as could be. 1 Maccabees. That's written by someone in Yehuda's army, a contemporary of Yehuda. He's writing the story in real time, describing all the battles. He spoke about battle, and he's as from as could be. He talks about the people, like even being machal. Udain said being machalo Shabbos until they got a psak that for Pigach Nefesh machalo Shabbos. It's a famous. Basically, Maccabees 1, originally was written in Hebrew, as from as could be. Maccabees 2 is written a bit later in Egypt, originally in Greek, also from, but more miraculous. They put more a focus on God behind the events. And there it gives the reason for the 8 days. It's not asking why celebrate, but why 8 days. So they say 8 days because they missed Sukkot that year. So they're making up for the 8 days of Sukkot. They made Chanukah 8 days, but that's just a conjecture of two Maccabees. But both books written by from people during the Second Temple period, neither mention the miracle of the menorah. Again, that's not a reason for a holiday for 8 days, but it's a sign. It can be a sign from God that God's behind the events. That's what the Maharsha says. It's not a
The other
siman. It's a
Maccabees were not written by from people.
Which one?
The
3 and
other
4
one,
Maccabees
3
were
and
much
4.
later. Yeah, they're written by Stukim. Now they're in what's called the Apocrypha, and the Chazal don't include them because they came out too late. Now they're after Ezra and Nehemiah. And the Christian Bibles, the Protestant Bibles, usually include them in what's called the Apocrypha because they want to continue them from Beit Rishon to Beit Sheni. They want to continue a prophecy from the Old Testament to the New Testament, but that's already has to do with what books make it. The fact it's not in the Bible doesn't mean, the fact it's not canonized doesn't make it not from. But when you read it, you can't miss the frumkeit of the author. Now the question when you tell the story, like people, if you read the story of the War of Independence, so you go to talk to army people, they give you all about all the battles. Talk to rabbis, they talk about the miracle of this, the miracle of that. Remember? You talk about the same wars that happened in our take our war now. This that we've gone through this year. So rabbis about all the miraculous things that happened. This was saved. This was and the military people talk about all the military sides of it. Now the fact that military people don't mention the little miracle things, that's their nature. And the fact that rabbis say look for the hand of God through a miracle, that also makes sense. So I'm not doubting whether it happened or not. My main point is, let's say you accept the opinion that the rabbis made up the miracle. So that makes it even more important to light candles. Hope that's clear? Because we're not celebrating the fact that God did a miracle. I'm not celebrating every year and saying Hallel because God did a miracle. Every day God does a miracle. Sun rises, it's a miracle. We breathe, it's a miracle. Life is a miracle. Right? I'm lighting candles to remember the message of Chanuka, of Lo B'chai V'Lo B'Koach Ki B'ruchi. I'm celebrating Hanukkah to remember what to do with my sovereignty if it returns. And if the act that the rabbis pick to remember that there's hope in times of darkness and what to do with that sovereignty when it does return is by remembering Zechariah and lighting candles and adding candles every day and doing it in your home, that's awesome. That's like right on the mark. It's irrelevant what actually happened historically.
Al-Hanisim only mentions the war.
What? Only what? Yeah. And Al-Hanisim is only mentioned. Al-Hanisim is very ancient. That's from Al-Hanisim is built on Sefer Maccabim. And by the way, the Hellenists are. We're not fighting the Greeks. We're fighting the Hellenized Jews. The Zaydim, the Tmeim are not Goyim. The Tmeim are Jews. We're Tamei, and the Zaydim or the troublemakers. Got it? And the Tzadikim and Rishayim, we're talking about that God helped the good guys beat the good Jews against the bad Jews, who were totally Hellenized. And the Hellenized Jews were convincing the Greeks to make the Gzerot Hadat because they were bothered by their friends doing all that religious stuff. You know the mistake the Greeks made when they made the Gzerah that the Jews can't learn Torah and you can't circumcise and you can't keep Shabbat. Then all of a sudden people they'll die to keep it. Because when you tell a Jew you have to learn Chumash, you have to learn Torah, you have to keep kosher, tell them you can't do it, whoa. They'll go out, tell someone you can't do something, all of a sudden they get motivated to do it. But that was the biggest mistake, telling them, what started the revolt was the Gzerot of not allowing the Jews to keep the religion. Had they just let us assimilate, we would have been gone by then. Thanks to the decrees against religion, that's how the religion sprouted up again. When you look at it from a historical perspective. Okay. Anyway, next week we go back to Sefer Shmot. Actually, it's the Devarim, and actually we're going to see this topic next week in Devarim. Devarim is going to make a big deal about sovereignty and military conquest. So, but what we do next week in Devarim will relate to what we did today, anyhow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Melissa, for organizing, and everyone have a Chag
Thank you,
Sameach
Melissa.
or a Chag or
Chag
Chanuka,
Sameach.
Smecha. Some people say. But
Thank
that's
you very much.
interesting
Bye-bye.
thing. Okay, and we share good news.